are to understand and analyze how strengthening the emotional bond between employees in the organization is going to impact the levels of commitment. We'll look at designing an organizational change management initiative and relating those core leadership tasks to their roles in organizational change. And we're also going to look at the complexities of organizational change and the change process and take a look at some of the barriers to effective leadership development. Our specific topics in this video are going to include forging emotional bonds between employees in the organization, emotional bonds that facilitate behavioral change, building emotional bonds, and we'll take a look at Southwest Airlines, and the importance of developing future leaders, including organizational barriers and recommended experiences for learning how to lead change. So we got a lot to cover. Let's start with the idea of forging emotional bonds between the employees and the organization. Emotional bonds facilitate behavioral change. An emotional bond is a relationship between the individual and their organization that's based in a deeply felt commitment to the organization's purpose and its goals. So our fourth core leadership task is forging an emotional bond between the employees and the organization. So to accomplish this, we look at everything. We transform the company from a collection of individuals doing their own thing, doing their own tasks, into a coordinated and an interdependent unit. It means that we create this bond. We create this bond that transcends instrumentally. What do I mean by that? I mean that we are becoming, in essence, a family, but we're doing it by allowing people to become part of the process, allowing them to become decision makers, become innovators, share ideas. We create a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning within the organization through the mission and the goals and the vision. And the employees can relate to those goals and that mission. It becomes part of the core values of the organization and the core values of the renewed strategy and the core values of the employees. And the employees are really willing to change their behaviors because they are committed to the core values of the company. So we create the emotional bonds to facilitate the behavioral change. And we've known from the beginning that change is all about changing behavior. We can change processes, but we always have to change behavior as well. So this means we look at the focus and we look at the commitment and we look at creating an environment of high performance. By creating that emotional bond, we create a deep sense of commitment to the organization. Simply working for a company that cares about you as an individual and cares about your contribution to that company, even with the smallest steps, is the process of forging an emotional bond. A great example is Southwest Airlines. It's one of those case studies that it's like the Energizer Bunny. It just keeps going and going and going. And the idea was Herb Kelleher needed to come up with something that would differentiate his company from the other companies. And he realized that he could create these emotional bonds by getting the employees involved. So his whole concept focused on interaction and involvement, getting the employees involved. He even called it love. So at Southwest Airlines, he opened up the communication channels, he opened up coordination, he came up with ways to deal with conflict and commitment. He said that if employees are committed to their organization emotionally as well as instrumentally, then they're more likely to engage in the desired or required behavioral change. So some of the benefits include the fact that an emotional bond is going to encourage the employees to coordinate their efforts, communicate, be honest with each other, take risks, be creative. It also enables employees to manage conflict in ways that are going to benefit the organization. Remember, there is functional and dysfunctional conflict, which we've talked about. It also creates an environment where the employees are willing to make sacrifices on behalf of the company. They'll act in ways that tells the company that they believe in their core values and their renewed strategies. And then finally, an emotional bond is going to create these networks, this mutuality that's going to reinforce the relationships, tap into our human drive. So this leads us to our final core task, which is to develop change leaders. Well, there's been a debate on leadership for a long time. Are leaders born? Are leaders made? Where do leaders come from? Well, there's a lot of support for both ideas. Some people say leaders are just simply born. It's an approach to leadership that assumes that we are born with the ability or the capabilities somewhere inside us to be a great leader, whereas the other side of the debate says, oh, wait a minute. We teach people to become great leaders. We develop them. They learn to lead based on their experiences, based on their ideas, based on their core values. So it's probably a 50-50 thing. The leaders are made approach assumes that there is a combination of experience and training and learning that creates the basis for effective leader. Whatever the approach, the importance is to recognize the potential leaders within an organization. We make those leaders by identifying them, honing them, training, developing, and helping them prepare for their futures. Are there going to be barriers? Sure. If we move too fast, there's probably going to be consequences. There's going to be succession failures. There's going to be mistakes because we haven't adequately trained and developed individuals for that leadership position. Another practice is movement within a single function, where we never really get the opportunity to train and develop a leader for the entire company, but just focus their leadership on a little part or piece or subunit of the company. Short-term performance pressures. Individuals have an opportunity to get more tactical experience and operational management than if we were looking at a long-term strategic visionary leadership succession program. However, we know the consequences of short-term over long-term. We've talked about them several times. And then recruitment for specific skills rather than fit. We know what happens with that. We end up with job hoppers. Internal employee pool may be thin. So we have to really dig out the individuals that have the leadership potential. It's so important that we understand how we go about developing future leaders. We want to focus on coalitions over hierarchy. Remember, we know how well hierarchy works. We want to focus on vision and strategy over budget. We want to focus on communicating purpose over policy. We do want to look at the long term, not just the short term. And we want to look at the culture or the new behaviors over the structure. So this kind of gives you an idea of why it's so important that we recognize who has leadership potential within the organization. So this is all that I have for you on this video. I do ask that you please do your knowledge check, and I will see you in our next video. Thanks.